to CFL and CFL football talk. I'm Candid Frank. He's David Morris Sudi. You can see how he can contact us on our socials. Well, as the team that we cover, the Toronto Argonauts, on a regular basis, attend every game. It has been an interesting season that began without their starting quarterback and their backup quarterback, who, by the way, was the Grey Cup MVP the end of last season, has now come up lame. There's been talk about Kelly starting, I think since probably day one, but let's say serious. So is he getting in around 6, 7, 8 weeks into the season? Fair? And where are we now? Because I'm confused, David. I'm totally confused where we are.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll start with the Nick Arbuckle part, because obviously he gets, he doesn't have his best game against Edmonton. Then he gets hurt. And you kind of know at the time that things are not looking good for him injury-wise. So then it's just like the obvious question is, all right, so is Chad Kelly going to be an option? And come Monday, there was no Chad Kelly. I think it was Monday or Tuesday. Actually, it might have been Tuesday. No Chad Kelly at practice, or not in a jersey, because they did a walkthrough. He was at practice but not actually participating. And you had Jarrett Daggy taking the first team reps. And I think it's consistent with a couple of things. One, Chad Kelly's on the 6th game, so unless they pull him off the 6th game, he's not going to be practicing, because they restarted the cycle again. I didn't understand that one completely, because I thought once you're on the 6th game, I don't know how that works with taking him and pulling him off, and how long does he have to, is he still eligible to be pulled off, and all those things. But from what I understand, he's on the 6th game, which means he cannot practice until the team takes him off the 6th game. The team is not going to take him off the 6th game until they think he is ready to go and play. And Ryan Dinwiddie,
or at least practice in preparation to play.
Yes.
If you don't mind, if I just
sure. And so I think I look at the situation. Ryan Dinwiddie has danced around it quite a bit, and I'll give credit to Dan Ralph and Dave Naylor, because they kept asking a lot of good follow-up questions. Okay, you don't think that not 100% to what the team is looking for, I guess, or they basically said, what does Chad need to do to show that he's ready to play? Because Chad Kelly thought he was good to play when he posted a video 2 weeks ago, or actually after Labor Day, saying, I'm ready. Let's go. And the team's like, well, you think you're ready, but we don't think you're ready. Or is there somebody else that's saying Chad's not ready and not getting green? Like there's so many factors in this, and we're not getting a straight answer. And look, it's been very frustrating for Argos fans, because they keep asking me. I don't have a good enough answer for them, because frankly, I don't know I don't know what Kelly needs to do to show that he's ready, because I also wonder, does the coaching staff not think because of the time he's had off, that putting him in this situation right now is the right thing to do? I think that's part of it.
And only because I can't get in everybody's head at the organization, from on high to on low, whatever level you want to think about. There is one thing, though, that really, to me, is not a red or a green or a yellow flag. It's just a flag. The one big flag that comes up for me is that since the day Ryan Dinwiddie came to Toronto and was interviewed over and over again, and has been interviewed over and over again, and I look forward in the future for him being interviewed, he's been pretty simple and basic with his answers. It's unusual to hear that he's you called it like dancing around the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's always been a pretty straightforward guy.
Yeah.
So it implies to me that there are other people that have opinions that aren't his, that he's basically, I don't want to say protecting, but impacted on, so that he doesn't have a forthright answer. His waffling is because there's a condition happening that he's dealing with that isn't under his control, to say the least. But that could be anything from what you said, the health of Kelly, to somebody somewhere, whether it be in Kelly's camp or somebody in the Argo camp, somewhere upper management, that they're not happy with the reports, whatever they know about his condition, to let him go out there. And so what does that all mean? I just spoke for nothing, because there's really nothing that we know about Kelly not playing. What we do know, and there's no doubt about it, the injury that he got last year that ended his season happened in a way of did what it did to his body that is a worst possible scenario for a football player and his future recovery. I think that's probably the underlying issue here, where his health is questionable. And are the Argos protecting him? To your point, are they in the belief that he shouldn't play? Because they're not letting him play. Yet he says a couple of weeks ago, I'm ready to go. So what the heck is going on? Well, here's the problem for those of us that are covering the team. We're going to go to the game tonight. We're going to watch the game, and we're going to arrive at some conclusions about the team and the prospects of that team making the playoffs based on this single game. So my point is, knowing the importance of this game and what it means to the Argos this season, Kelly not playing speaks loudly. It's a big, big point, because not even the situation that the Argos find themselves in is one that'll bring Kelly out to play. Now, we've known over time, players do and have played through injuries. Well, apparently he's at a point where his injury, he can't play through his injury either. Because if he was healthy enough to play, he would be playing. So I'm really, this is a very interesting situation for the team. And I can't overemphasize the fact that this game means a lot. This is a game between them and the Montreal Alouettes. And the Montreal Alouettes have been sliding since starting they had a really good season. They are now but one game ahead of Toronto. If Toronto wins tonight, those two teams will be tied. And if you and I think about the state of the standings only in regards to Montreal and Toronto 6 or so weeks ago, in fact, let's say back to the last time they played, the Argos were completely out of the Montreal picture. Today, it's a whole different story, and that importance for this game is clear.
Yeah. What I see here is a real indictment on what they think about these games and Kelly's readiness, right? Like I look back on it as another person said, well, last year he was ready to come back in during when the team needed him in a playoff. They weren't in a playoff position, or they weren't in the playoff position with. I think they were kind of like in and out of it, but they brought him back, and there was no issue about that. I said, well, that's a suspension, not an injury. I had to tell that person this is totally different. We're talking about. I think their concern is he has not taken meaningful reps, and this offensive line is not the same offensive line it's been. So where they think, oh, if he's not going to be able to move around as much, and if he's not 100% in moving himself around, that's going to be problematic. So there's clearly something that he has in terms of the preparedness of the situation that he finds himself in, because to all accounts, like I've only seen him a few times in practice. I haven't seen any. To me, I haven't seen a quarterback that's like been full go. Like I've seen videos of him doing training and stuff, but that's totally different when you've got you know, a pass rusher trying to run you down and sack you, right? Can you break free, right? Can you maneuver around and all those things? I don't think, and one person says, well, are they just trying to not have him play at all? And I'm like, I don't think that's the problem either. I don't think they are purposely holding Chad Kelly out, because frankly, you would take Chad Kelly over Jared Day. Like and I'm not saying, and I'm not
say a number, David. At 80%, you would take, let's say 80%.
Yeah.
You would take Kelly at 80% of his full
right.
capabilities, right? Yeah.
And that's not an indictment on Jared Day. It's just one guy has won an MOP and one guy hasn't. One guy has played games in the CFL. I get that, but he hasn't played at the level that Chad Kelly has. So like I get that. But I think I just think that they're not comfortable at where he's at physically. I think that's what it comes down to, because we know Ryan Dinwiddie came out 2 weeks ago and said Chad Kelly's our franchise quarterback, right? When they were talking about making that decision between him and Arbuckle. He's our franchise guy. Eventually, those are going to be tough conversations we're going to have. But I don't know. It's become like this was a very interesting part of the whole situation where you lose your safety net, Nick Arbuckle, and we thought maybe that would eventually push the issue to play Chad Kelly. For them to not even have that as an option or to consider it tells us, I think, where they think he's at physically. And I don't think it's a mental thing, because he put out a video 2 weeks ago saying he's ready. Like, I don't think it's a mental issue. And I think this is probably a player that's not 100% saying he's 100%, he's ready to go. And the organization saying, look, we don't think you're ready. He's been medically cleared. I'm going to include this. He's been medically cleared. But to what degree is he medically cleared? And we even asked, was there concern about him re-injuring a re-injury? Well, he's been medically cleared, but there's never a guarantee. I think when I heard medically cleared, I said, okay, then that means he should be good to play. But medically clear is one thing. Him actually being in game shape, I think, is where the real concern is.
I'm sitting here. Like I said, I started by saying I was confused. And my confusion is this. Now you added another layer to my confusion. And now the confusion becomes clearer. And how that happens is we have a player who said he was ready. We have a player who's been medically cleared, and we have a coach who says he's not playing. Somewhere between those two facts standing on one side of the equation and the last one, we have a coach who's uneasily saying he's not ready to play and waffling. I'm of the mind that I'm going to drill down on the fact that he thinks he can play. The medical experts say he can play. The coach says he can't play in a very uncomfortable way. And I'm going to emphasize that for football fans and for Argo fans. He's uncomfortable in saying that he can't play or won't play. And that to me, now what we're talking about is somebody doesn't want him to play. Somebody literally does not want him to play. or some group does not want him to play. Because if he says he's ready and then doctors support that he's ready, there's only one thing that could cause him not to play: some sort of re-injury or some sort of setback, which, knowing Ryan Dinwiddie, the little that I do know him as a football coach and a person who talks to him, a fair amount, he would say that he's aggravated his injury. So that's not on the table. He didn't re-aggravate his injury. If you talk, I mean, I just can't see Ryan Dinwiddie when he's being pressed like he was this week, as you informed me and you witnessed. He was being pressed, and he didn't come out. I'm going to check with you right now because I want to make sure that wasn't said. Did he mention anything about being being re-injured or a setback or anything like that kept him out?
No, he's always been firm in the fact that he thinks,
That's
is
my red flag.
Chad able to protect himself? That was the phrase he kind of always has been using. Can Chad protect himself?
But David, when you say that speaks to he's not being protected.
I think that has a lot to do with I see this as, look, there's always a risk of re-injury. Even if you're 100%, there's always a risk you get hurt again. So I don't think it's a risk of re-injury. I just think it's got more to do with, he hasn't played since last November. To throw him into the situation is probably the wrong. Throwing him into the situation without having a lot of time to get himself ready. This is also a short week. They only had one full day of practice. Is that enough time to get Chad Kelly dialed in and ready to start in a must-win game? Probably not. And I think that also plays a factor into it. Maybe if they win and next week they're in BC, maybe that changes it a little bit. I don't know. I just think that the coaching staff, someone on the I think somebody is saying he's not ready. As much as he thinks he's ready, he's not ready. And I don't think it's physically. I don't know if it's all physical though.
Yeah. Well, here's the funny part. It's not funny, but here's the part that again, we're drilling down, and I hope we're not boring our after 20 minutes of having this conversation. I hope we're not boring our viewers. We knew going in that Kelly was hurt. We knew that there was a quarterback that could take over and had the ability to lead this team to wins. After all, Arbuckle, led this team to the Grey Cup and won. And the season, as it's progressed, and I've said this from the very beginning, and I continue to say it after every game. I haven't talked about Arbuckle's play this past weekend, so this is before this last game. He had improved every week and been a better, more efficient, mistake-making less quarterback over this season. So for me, it was a slam dunk. Why put Kelly in? So that's what's different here. Now, is it possible that they don't think Kelly's ready enough to overcome the difference between him and he's in his third year? Daigie's in his third year at the Canadian Football League, first year with the Argonauts, that they think that they're better off with Daigie under these circumstances. And if, because you said something there that interests me, if they win tonight with Daigie under center, why wouldn't they play him the next game with their head held high and saying, we're going with Daigie? You know what I mean, David? Because at the end of the day here, that's what this is all about. I think
a big part of it,
winning is always the bottom line with this Argo organization. It always looks like that. It always is something they aim to do, and they've been good at it.
I don't disagree with that. I do think that there is, these games mean so much, and I think that, how's the best way to put this? I think, look, if the Argos come out and Jared Daggy gets them the win, there's no reason why he should lose the chance to play if
Right.
Kelly all of a sudden becomes an option. I don't think that's going to be the case. Now, if they lose this game, it all depends on what happens around them, right? Because you have BC. Technically, BC, there is the crossover right now, right?
Absolutely.
Actually, I don't think the crossover is in effect right now because wait, no, the
I know
crossover should be in.
BC 6 and 7,
Yeah,
Argos 5 and 8. So
sorry,
the 100%.
CFL.ca. Surprise, surprise, not working properly.
Okay.
Right now they got to play for second place. But
Well,
if they have the same record,
second place guarantees them they're not
Yeah.
involved in
unless BC loses, okay, so BC loses, that makes the next week's game even more important, right? Because BC plays Calgary this weekend. If BC loses that game, and even if Toronto loses this game, Toronto could beat BC next week and still maintain third
right.
because they have the identical record.
Right.
It's a mess.
And don't forget, Winnipeg's dropped into that picture too. They're at 6 and 7 as well.
Yeah.
So it's a crowded little opportunity here for all these teams. And then we talk about Edmonton; they're only one game behind. They're the same record as Toronto is right now, and Ottawa's only one game behind those two teams, Toronto and Edmonton. So the picture's murky at best right now, and I like the idea that these teams are playing each other. I like the idea that these games mean a lot. The disappointing part is, as always in the Canadian Football League, always the biggest disappointment in the Canadian Football League for whatever organization ails from this problem, which is losing your starting quarterback. And now the Argos lose their backup quarterback. The chances of winning in the Canadian Football League shrink drastically when you're not using your number one quarterback. We've learned that, and it's become a very important lesson. But there has been a silver lining over the past couple of years where backup quarterbacks have caught up to the starting quarterbacks to the point where they can carry the ball a little more than it was a few years ago. So the question now is, if you're a gambling person, which I know you are, the odds of the Argos' third quarterback being successful, third on the depth chart, being successful is basically they're going to have to draw from an inside straight, if I can use a gambling term. This is what they need. And, the team has played really well, not just the quarterback in the last game. For the most part, I think it's fair to say that the other two phases probably played their best game in the last game.
Well, look at what Montreal just. I mean, if we want to talk about last week's games, I thought the Toronto win, like that was a huge win for them to come back, even though Arbuckle wasn't at his best. They find a way to pull off another last second win. So you think that's a huge win for this Toronto team. Then you see what Montreal did against Saskatchewan, and you go, well, as good as the result saved Toronto, but Montreal's like, okay, but you're staying right where you are. Tyson Philpott, unbelievable. McLeod Bethel Thompson had the game of his life, but Tyson Philpott showed everybody if this guy was healthy, he would be in the most outstanding Canadian conversation, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
And how much different this Montreal team looks when they have a more complement of their receivers, and that's been a big problem. And
Well,
if you're
and Philpott himself, David, he has been a part of the winning success by the Alouettes in the regular season since he's been there, and the Grey Cup, and the playoffs and the Grey Cup.
yeah,
He makes the biggest difference on that team, the biggest in my mind, along with the quarterback.
yeah, he does. And like a quarterback's only good if he has players to play around him, right?
Right.
McLeod was also making his return from an injury, so that was another factor into this as well. They're using their backup quarterback for a change and not their third quarterback. I mean, it's a big win. It's a huge win for.
Very.
It's a huge win for Montreal because their defense did well enough. Eventually Trevor Harris was just pulled from the game, but their defense didn't really need to do much because their offense played so well. Like that offense put up 530 yards of total offense. If I'm Toronto, considering the struggles that they've had defensively, I'm a little that to me, if like as much as the Jared Dagey him starting is
absolutely
it puts you in a tough spot in terms of your puts you in a tough spot considering your quarterback situation. I would kind of say going up against Montreal after what they just did offensively, that to me is I think the more concerning part against a Saskatchewan team that's hasn't played like that all year, and all of a sudden they gave up that type of yardage.
Well, if you're an Argo supporter,
now Saskatchewan also did have some injuries in the secondary, right. I will say, so that was that as well.
If you're an Argo supporter, you've got to hope that the Argos play it well enough to beat the Montreal team, whichever one shows up. The Saskatchewan game, you're kind of hoping that Saskatchewan kind of took for granted that they could take Montreal, and Montreal surprised them. The good news is for Toronto, that is a message that the Argos now have. They're not going in this game with the misconception that this Montreal team is on a bad roll. They're coming in hot. That was a really good team that they beat for whatever reason, and they beat them. They gave Saskatchewan a beatdown that I don't remember them getting this year. A beatdown. I'm trying to remember if they even got a beatdown last year. This was a beatdown. This was Saskatchewan not playing at all the good football that they've been playing the past couple of years. It was probably their worst game in a few years. So there's that, right? But the big thing for the Argos right now is Dagey has to use the system, the offensive system that has given the Argos under Ryan Dinwiddie a chance to win. So he's got to give the team a chance to win. Does he have to carry the team on his back? I don't think so. If the other two phases improve on the way they've played in the past and improve on the way they played this past week, which was pretty good. That's what they're going to need. It's that simple. They're going to have to find a running game. They're going to have to find a running game for sure and continue with the great receiving that they have. And the defense has to bend, not break. So it's going to be a very interesting game because of the circumstances in the standings. And it isn't going to be, it's a flip. Right now, what we're looking at are two teams that are below 500 who are not impressive in the long haul. But you know what, David? The possibilities of these two teams playing an impressive game tonight are high, in my opinion, because both these teams have played really important games and have won in recent memory. And I believe both of them are capable, the same coaching staffs, are capable of coming up with a plan and executing that plan and probably having one of the most exciting games both these franchises have had this year. If you don't have a ticket to this game, you could be missing one of the best games of the year for these two teams.
Yeah, no, I mean these games these games down the stretch give. I mean, if you're not watching these games, like I don't know what else I could say to convince you to watch these games. We've had some high level performances, some big playoff implications, and now you got teams that are looking to clinch their playoff berth. So like Hamilton can clinch a playoff berth if Toronto loses and BC loses and Hamilton wins. So I'm just reading the playoff scenarios for this week. A BC loss and a Winnipeg loss and an Edmonton loss gives the Rough Riders the playoff home date. So I don't know if that means first and second are technically.
It means first and second. It means that they'll get a home game.
By the way, so just a reminder for those who are arguing about the crossover rules. The fourth place team in Division A has to have more points than the third place in Division B. So depending on which, so right now A would be the West, B would be the East. A4 will cross over and take the place of B3 in terms of playoff seeding, and then they would play in the division semifinals. So they cannot be tied.
Right. So right now, BC would be in the playoffs if the season ended today with the records that the teams have right now. Toronto would be out of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
That's simple. And that's why the game against BC is important. That's why the game against Montreal is important. And I'll say this again, not to throw cold water on what's a good possibility for the Argos. Those last 3 games of the season are going to be hard for them to win. They're going to be hard. The 3 best teams, they'll be playing the 3 best teams, I think. Well, not Calgary isn't in there, but 3 really good teams they're going to have to beat at the end of the season, back to back to back. So they've got to put themselves in a position where if they lose one of 3 of those games, they can still get in. That's all my point is. So
yeah,
they got to get on a roll, and they got to create a little bit of space to cover themselves for that tough 3 games back to back to back at the end of the season.
Yeah, no, I agree with. I think that Toronto's margin for error in the next 2 games is like none.
Nothing.
They don't have in these 2 games against teams that they're one team they're chasing, and then next week the team that's trying to do the crossover against them. Presently, they can't lose those games. If they lose tonight against Montreal, it makes it a very bleak picture.
And the tiebreaker, they lose the tiebreaker as well, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, I think they've already lost the tiebreaker because they lost
both. They lost both.
They lost both against Montreal. The first game.
So that's another reason. That's an extra. That's an extra game they have to win.
Yeah. They have to surpass Montreal. They can't tie Montreal because if they tie Montreal, that ain't good enough. Right? They need to beat Montreal and hope Montreal loses another game. Because if they beat Montreal, it's level record.
Right. And then
but now then it comes down to Montreal places Calgary next week. Toronto takes on BC. So essentially, Toronto will want to make sure that Montreal loses against Calgary next week, and they can beat BC to have sole possession of second. Yeah, but the margin for error for these 2 teams, it's none. Like they've lost too many games to start the year for there to be any margin for error at this point.
No, they're at the point where they got to establish. They've got to establish they're in the driver's seat for themselves. That's the only. That's what they need to do as soon as possible, and as soon as possible is tonight, beating Montreal. You talked about Saskatchewan. They've clinched a playoff berth. Saskatchewan has a playoff berth. They're guaranteed in the playoffs. They've clinched that. Calgary is the team that interests me, David. Going into this playoff, I don't know if you want to be any team in the West playing Calgary. and they've continued to play really well. I'm wondering, David, is it their defense we've seen all year? I just I just see that team is a good playoff team because we always talk about offenses winning in the regular season, defenses winning championships. That gives Calgary a pretty good foot up because their defense has been the most consistent in the league.
Yeah, Calgary's been the more consistent team. That's for sure. BC has the ability to throw up a big game offensively. We know that. But Calgary's the more well-rounded team. Um, Calgary's pass rush gives such fit for any team, right? So I think that's always been a tough part for any team going up against them. But we've also seen there's vulnerabilities with Calgary. They allowed Justin Rankin to have over 200 yards rushing, and that crushed them. So if you're BC, again, you feel confident because of the guy you have at quarterback to go out and win this game. But if you're Calgary, you're like, well, we know how to stop a good quarterback. We've done it. We've beaten Trevor Harris this year. So there's it's going to be like, to me, that's the game of the week is BC Calgary, because there's so much at stake for, like, Calgary wants to stay within striking distance of Saskatchewan, because if they win, they move to 9-4. So they can ensure
And a
that,
game in hand.
yeah, they can ensure that they can stay within reach of first in the West. First in the West is not locked up yet.
Nope.
So Calgary, like I talked about those scenarios, that scenario goes out the window if Calgary wins, because Calgary can secure the home playoff date all throughout. And that to me, like, that's something to play for. We've talked about that so many times, the advantage that brings. But I think Calgary probably has, they're coming off a bye, right? BC had a pretty, they had a decent game against Ottawa where Nathan Rourke put up some good, 38 points. They continue to put up points. But Calgary's going to want to lick their wounds a little bit after what happened against Edmonton. Not just defensively, where they allowed all those yards on the ground, but also the fact that offensively they didn't look the part, really. They put up yards, but they couldn't score. Yes, they had two touchdowns. Two touchdowns ain't going to cut it against BC, so they're going to have to either make this a defensive battle, which we know Calgary will want 10 times out of 10. But Vernon Adams is going to have to now show his old team. Like, we're forgetting this. This is his first game against his old team that said, we're going in a different direction. You played so well for us, but guess what? We believe in this other guy here. We brought him back, and we had him take your job. But not only that, I also think that if you're Calgary, this is a prove it game. Prove it that you, with the stakes high, you can come out and win. Even though they've done it a few times this year, but it doesn't matter.
Between Calgary and BC, there's only 2 wins difference, with Winnipeg down the middle. Now, Winnipeg is a team that they're 2 different teams. There's the team with a good Caleros, and there's a team without Caleros. And their inconsistency is directly attributable to the inconsistency at quarterback that they've had this year, which is kind of scary if you're playing them a little bit, because there was a time until this year when Winnipeg showed that when they want the game, they can take it over. This is really a mix mash of opportunity for everybody. The reason everybody has an opportunity to make the playoffs here, and by everybody, I mean everybody, all 9 teams can make the playoffs. It's not so much because they dominate, anyone dominates. It's if someone can play well consistently, which is something none of them have been able to do, and the records speak to that. So Winnipeg, to me, and this is the scary part if you're a Winnipeg fan, they could finish out of the playoffs. They're not anywhere near guaranteeing a position in the playoffs. So that's what makes this week's games really important. And now they're playing Ottawa in Ottawa. And David, Ottawa's had some good games when they've really needed a good game. If Ottawa wins tomorrow against Winnipeg, you know that murky mess that we're calling the standing, it gets murkier. It's good. This has been the most interesting CFL season that I've watched closely going back to 2012.
Yeah, no, I think Ottawa, I'm sure, is probably saying, hey, don't forget about us. But in a way, everyone kind of is forgetting about Ottawa because I think Drew Brown is supposed to be playing. So that changes things a little bit. But Ottawa is just, every time they take a step forward, it was 2 steps back this season. And we know Winnipeg, it just has not been great for them, right? Without Zach Collaros, like this is a totally different Blue Bombers team. And, you know, I can't remember what the status is this week for, I think, with Collaros. I think I'm just trying to check. I think he wasn't dressing at Bombers practice. I think he was back, but Strevler was taking the first team reps. I think if you're Winnipeg, you've beaten Ottawa before, but that was with Collaros at behind center. You need to go out and prove that you can win a game without Zach Collaros. And they haven't been able to do that yet, really. I mean, they did at the beginning of the year when he was suspended and that first game. But it's been such a struggle for them. They have weapons on offense. We've seen it. They've got guys that can contribute. And I think this is where you have Brady Oliveira go out and show why he's an MOP and MOC candidate player. I think that's where you have to, if you're Ottawa, you need him to take the pressure off of Strevler.
So I'll help you out here and let you know that Collaros was in full practice on Tuesday.
Okay.
I'll help you with that.
I think it was full practice, but I don't think I think Strevler was still taking most of the reps, from what I understood.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But the point is that he's healthy enough to play. But here's the thing: it hasn't mattered this year. It's been a situation where his play hasn't been that good either when he's been healthy. You know, it's been a year that basically has grown out of what happened in the Grey Cup. David, he's not been the same since he was injured. His finger got injured in the Grey Cup, and it's been a continuation for Collaros through this season. That inconsistency, right? And is it his health? Is it his age? Has he lost his mojo? Is his confidence undercut by some capacity that we're not seeing, that's not visual? The fact is, though, that Winnipeg finds themselves in a position they haven't been in years, and that is this late in the season, in a situation where slippery slope that the standings are right now in this league, they could be out of the playoffs. Because if they lose to Ottawa gets closer to Winnipeg and helps eliminate the opportunity for Winnipeg to get the crossover, which could be the only way they get into the playoffs by virtue of the way the standings are in the West. So Ottawa can be a factor in making a run to the playoffs. If they get on a roll, if Brown is healthy and he plays the way that he can, David, I still believe in this Ottawa team. I still believe they can do something. The good news for them is they're positioned in a league where a lot of teams aren't playing well consistently, right? So that's again why I say this is the most interesting season, because nobody's out of the playoffs this late in the season. You know, there's only 5 games left for most of these teams, and everybody's still in the picture.
I mean, yeah, that's true. Like nobody's been officially eliminated, and you have to play like that.
No, not even close. Saskatchewan's made the playoffs, right? And they're doing it with a 10-3 record, which is understandable with 5 games left.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's the only guarantee that we have so far. And I think we can hedge our bets with Calgary. I think they'll be in the playoffs. They've got enough lead on the teams below them that I think they're pretty secure. They haven't clinched, but they're close to clinching. Like you said, a win by Calgary can be a good thing for them. Edmonton and Hamilton. Before we go, two teams that this year are playing. They've made advancements. Hamilton a lot, Edmonton a little bit. This game right here could help Edmonton in being one of the most improved teams this year, David. They've had a really good season. A victory here, I mean, a really good season considering where they've been in past years, out of the playoffs at this time of year. So if they could win this game, I know it's only a 6-8 record that they'll have. But to me, that's a real good improvement for this organization and a setup for a run at the end of the year that will be really interesting for them.
Yeah, no, I think if you're, I agree that if you're Edmonton, you need to show that you've got mental resolve. That last week was a gutting loss against Toronto. All the stuff that happened after the game, which we hadn't even talked about that. We'll maybe talk about that after.
Yeah,
but everything that happened, it was a very emotional game for quite a few players too. And it just, compounds with mistakes. You force mistakes, but you made mistakes on your own. And I do think that if you're Edmonton, you need to prove that this year's different in a way, that you're not going to just give up when things are getting tough.
Yeah, and this is an opportunity. As bad as their record might be considered, 5-8 is not a really good record. I get that. But because of what's going on around them, this game is critical. It is very, very critical. And it could be very beneficial to them.
It can be. Even if they don't win, they need to show that they're not the team that's going to go down without a fight. Because they have in too many seasons shown that.
That's a great segue. Because they proved it at the end of the last game that they're willing to go down only with a fight.
Yeah, that was I guess because I wasn't there, but I did get a good recap from a few people that were.
I was on the field. I saw it up close.
This was don't dish it if you can't take it. Essentially, is what the Argos were telling them. They had Jordan Williams right off the hop during warm-up was going after Dinwiddie. I get it. You got cut by the team. You feel a certain way. And so you're gonna say he was saying his piece essentially. But then you include the defensive coach, Demetrius Maxey, who used to play with the Argos, then moved back to Edmonton. I think that pissed Dinwiddie off, and that got personal when a guy who used to be on your coaching staff is also grilling you. Now, I will say that what Dinwiddie did, I can understand emotions. You're behind your team and things. It's an emotional win. It's an emotional victory. But as the head coach, when you tell your team discipline, you preach discipline, we got to be disciplined. You can't be going to the sidelines. I understand it's an emotional situation. We've seen Dinwiddie let emotions get the best of him. We've seen it countless times, and it's his. I think the team rallies behind it, but it can also, it's a tough one. And I think somebody should have grabbed him before he had that opportunity to go to the sideline. And I think Jared Daggy also went towards them and gave them a little bit something. I mean, that was a guy that got cut by the team in May, and he showed You think I'm not good enough? And I showed that I am because we won. But I do think that first off, we will not know if there's a fine handed to Ryan Dinwiddie. I did get confirmation on that any discipline for coaching, it's different. It doesn't get announced by the league unless somebody leaks it from the league. Only players' fines get leaked. I think he probably might get a little something just because of how things they want to set a precedent. I also think having both benches on the same sideline don't help. They're like within shouting distance of each other, Frank. We know this.
Oh, no kidding.
All the East stadiums allow this to happen because
the
of the
55-yard line is the dividing line between the two teams.
Yeah. So I'm sure there's probably been a talking to about this week and not allowing that to happen again. But I do think that if you're Toronto, you like the fact that your coach has your back, but the coach he's got to be the example. He's got to be the example. He can't let his emotions get to him.
I'm going to push back a little. You already pushed back a little for me by qualifying that statement by saying you appreciate, from your perspective, you appreciate that Dinwiddie actually stood up for his team. I agree with you 100%. I think also that football is a very emotional game. It's a team game, probably more than any other sport, I think. Team is very important, and the biggest reason why team is so important, it's not a bond between 10 guys on the sideline like in basketball or 20 in hockey. There are a lot of guys on that sideline. There are a lot of players who are part of the team who are injured. I mean, there's a lot of testosterone on the sideline. And sometimes testosterone needs to be fed, but it can be overfed, to your point. What Dinwiddie did was cross the line, but at the end of the day, he didn't cross the line. There was no physical altercation. I won't call it what happened, a physical altercation.
Yeah,
so they didn't cross that line. But the line he did cross, which is most important, is showing passion. And, a lot of times, David, when we talk about sports, we talk about, does the team have the passion to win, right? And I don't think there's anything that has been shown by Dinwiddie that he's not a passionate guy. We've watched him. We've watched him from the lows that this year has brought him, lows that he's never experienced as an Argo head coach, with any kind of consistency that he's seen this year. And we've seen him, the worst that he got publicly against his players, and some might suggest it's justifiable, and that is his unhappiness with the offensive line. That's pretty much the only place where he's squished a little bit, right? So he's been under control, knowing how emotional it's like. I've seen him, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. We saw him at the end of games where he was almost in tears. He was so frustrated with how badly the team played. So he wears his heart on his sleeve when it comes to this team, knowing that he came perilously close to doing something he should never do. He didn't cross the line, but he did walk up to it and got a little too close to that line, and he shouldn't have done that. I agree with you 100%, because the game, it's about a game. It's only a game. At the end of the game, it's in the books. You move on to the next game. That's when you start thinking about the next game, as soon as that final whistle goes.
Yeah. And look, I'll never question Dinwiddie's commitment and his passion. Never will, because he certainly brings it. We've seen it. It's just, you got to be very careful about lines being crossed, and that could have gone worse. That like, we're fortunate there wasn't a big brawl, because there very well could have been, in my opinion.
And that's a salute to the players, David, because the coaches were getting a little out of hand during the game and after the game. And the players, while some players were engaging because of what was going on, most of them said, nope, that ain't happening. We saw both sides have players pulling their players back and pulling their coaches back. So, cooler heads prevailed. No long-term damage was done, but there was a lesson in the moment. There's a lesson in the moment that can be revisited, and I'm sure it'll be spoken about or has been spoken about after the game. That there's an understanding of that was not professional. The bottom line here is that's what it isn't. It isn't professional. They've got to be professional, and they weren't for a moment. Long enough to establish concern, but not long enough to cross the line. So that was really good. Any other subject this week that we haven't broached that you want to talk about?
No, I don't think there's really anything else this is going to be, we'll see how the playoff picture looks after when we talk about it next week.
Shoot. The playoff picture each day, Friday and Saturday, is going to become more muddy or more clear. I got my money more muddy, David.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting and more interesting. He's David Morisuti of Sportsnet. You can follow him on Sportsnet and, of course, Locked On Leafs, which I've had the pleasure of being on once in a while. Congratulations on the wait is over. The NHL season's almost here, where you and Mike can really delve into the Toronto Maple Leafs and the stuff that's going on, more and more to talk about. And, of course, we'll be doing our Leaf Talk thing, Aaron and I, 3 times a week, along with other sports that Canadians participate in and Canadian cities. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you again. I don't know when. Normally it was like 4 o'clock on Monday, but we've been doing it later and later in the week. We'll see if that trend continues. Look for us. If you can't find us live, you can find us on YouTube, Candid Frank Stanishi 1030. And so thank you for being here, David, and everyone, thank you for watching. We appreciate you. Have a great weekend and enjoy the football.